I recently received a handwritten letter from a viewer named Eleanor. She is 74 years old and lives in Michigan. In her letter, she wrote something that stopped me in my tracks. She said, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving a mess behind for my daughter to clean up." But how do you let go of a lifetime? That question, it's not just about clutter. It's about memory. It's about identity. It's about love and loss and what we choose to carry with us as we grow older. If you're watching this right now, chances are you're standing at a crossroads too. Maybe your closets are full of old holiday decorations and clothes from decades past. Maybe your drawers are filled with photos, paperwork, and things you haven't touched in years. Maybe your heart is heavy with the idea of letting go, and maybe, just maybe, you've been putting it off because you don't know where to begin. I want you to know this. You are not alone, and more importantly, you don't have to do it all at once or do it perfectly. You just have to start with honesty, with kindness, and with a little bit of courage. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 gentle but powerful lessons that have helped women just like Eleanor and maybe like you. Let go of the physical clutter that weighs us down while holding tight to the stories, the meaning, and the moments that matter most. So take a deep breath. This is not about getting rid of your life. It's about finally making space for it. Lesson 1. The Future Self-Test. Let me tell you about Mary. Mary is 69 years old and lives just outside of Portland, Oregon. She spent over 30 years as a high school English teacher, and her students adored her. Her classroom was the kind that smelled like old books and fresh chalk. She had a drawer full of peppermint candies and always wore one of her signature scarves. She was respected, admired, and for many years being Miss Thompson was her entire identity. But when Mary retired 8 years ago, something happened that surprised her. She no longer knew who she was outside of that role. She wasn't teaching anymore. The phone stopped ringing. No more school bells, no more lesson plans. Her mornings became quiet, a little too quiet. She began to fill her days with gardening, watercolor painting, and cooking for her grandkids. But every time she opened her closet, it felt like walking into a museum exhibit. Rows of neatly pressed blazers, closed toe pumps, slacks in every shade of beige, outfits that said professional, polished, in control. The problem was, none of it fit who she was anymore. One day, while sorting through a box of old grade books and parent newsletters, she found a note she had written to herself the day she retired. It said, "You are allowed to evolve." She sat with that sentence for a long time. That's when I introduced her to what I call the future self-test. It's a simple but powerful question you ask yourself when you're trying to decide whether to keep something or let it go. You hold the item in your hands, take a breath, and ask, does this belong to the woman I'm becoming? Or is it tying me to someone I've already been? Let me say that again. Does this serve the woman I'm becoming? Or is it anchoring me to a past that's already complete? Mary started small. She chose one of her blazers. It was navy blue with silver buttons, classic, elegant, and very Miss Thompson. She had worn it to parent conferences, school assemblies, and more than one retirement party for her colleagues. But in that moment, standing in her quiet closet with her dog lying on the rug and the sunlight coming in, she realized something. She no longer needed that blazer to prove her worth. Her wisdom wasn't hanging in that jacket. It lived inside her now. She folded it neatly, placed it in a donation bag, and whispered, "Thank you." And just like that, she took the first step into her new chapter. Over the next few days, she let go of a dozen scarves, 6 pairs of shoes, and even her old leather briefcase. Not because she was giving up on who she had been, but because she was finally making space for who she was becoming. The future self-test is not about forgetting your past. It's about honoring it by no longer making it the centerpiece of your identity. You're not frozen in time. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to let go of the roles you've outgrown, so you can step into the ones that still have space to bloom. So let me ask you gently, who are you becoming? Is she lighter, more joyful, more curious? Is she someone who spends mornings on the porch with her coffee and evenings trying new recipes just for the fun of it? Or is she someone who still feels weighed down by items that reflect a version of herself that no longer feels true? Here's what I want you to do after this video. Go to your closet. Pick one item, just one. Hold it in your hands. Ask yourself, does this serve the woman I am becoming? If the answer is yes, find a way to truly honor it. Keep it with intention. Care for it. But if the answer is no, release it with love. Say thank you. Let it go. You are not erasing your past. You are clearing space for the rest of your life. And that, my friend, is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself. Lesson 2. The 10-Minute Miracle. Let's talk about Grace. Grace is 72 years old, lives in upstate New York, and has been a widow for 5 years. She's the kind of woman who makes strong coffee, reads the newspaper with a pen in hand, and still sends handwritten birthday cards to her nieces and nephews. Her home is quiet now. Too quiet, she once told me. After her husband passed, she found herself unable to touch anything in their shared spaces. The garage, the hall closet, the attic. She said it felt like trying to move through wet cement. One day, she decided she would finally tackle the attic. She brought up a folding chair, a trash bag, and a thermos of tea. But within 10 minutes, she was sitting on the floor, holding a snow globe from their first trip to Vermont. Crying so hard, she couldn't breathe. She called me that evening and said, "I can't do this. It's too much. Every object is a memory, and every memory is tangled in grief." That's when I shared with her the 10-minute miracle. Here's how it works. You don't clean the whole attic. You don't organize the entire closet. You don't even look at the whole box. You choose one drawer, one small shelf, one envelope. You set a timer for 10 minutes, and you give that space your full attention. When the timer goes off, you stop. No exceptions. You close the drawer, walk away, and let it be done for the day. It sounds almost too simple. But for Grace, it was life-changing. She started with her husband's nightstand, just one drawer. She found an old watch, 3 pens that no longer worked, 2 pairs of glasses, and a birthday card she had given him when he turned 50. She kept the watch and the card. The rest she let go of. And when the timer rang, she stopped, even though part of her wanted to keep going. Here's the beauty of this method. You never get emotionally depleted. You never hit that point of exhaustion where you start putting things back just because you can't think straight anymore. With just 10 focused minutes a day, you bypass the emotional wall that usually stops us. You stop before the overwhelm hits. You give your heart space to breathe. Grace did this every morning after breakfast. 1 drawer, 1 envelope, 1 box. In a single week, she completed 11 10-minute sessions. That's less than 2 hours total. But the difference in her energy, her clarity, and her sense of hope, it was enormous. She told me, "I used to dread walking past that attic door. Now I smile at it. It's no longer a burden. It's a quiet space filled with peace." So why does this work so well, especially for women in our season of life? Because the truth is, we only have so much emotional energy each day. Between health appointments, caring for others, processing grief, or just trying to stay connected, we're stretched thin. And yet the clutter keeps calling to us, quietly, loudly, always. The 10-minute miracle gives you structure. It gives you control. It gives you permission to do something small. And let that be enough. You don't need to declutter your entire life in a weekend. You just need to build momentum. One small victory at a time. Here's what I'd love for you to try today. Find one drawer. It could be in the kitchen, the bathroom, or that catch-all desk in the hallway. Set a timer, 10 minutes, not a second more, and begin. Don't overthink. Don't question every item. Trust your instincts. Your heart already knows what belongs in your next chapter. And when that timer rings, I want you to close the drawer, stand up, and walk away. Celebrate that small win. Because it is a win, you are building a habit of clarity, one quiet session at a time. Grace recently told me that these 10-minute moments have become her daily ritual, like brushing her teeth or saying her morning prayer. She even keeps a small notebook to log what she's let go of, both physically and emotionally. It's no longer about throwing things out. It's about making peace, letting go in gentle pieces instead of tearing through your memories with a heavy hand. So if you're feeling stuck, frozen by the idea of too much, remember this: 10 minutes, one space, one deep breath. That's all it takes to begin again. Lesson 3. The Gratitude Goodbye. Let me introduce you to Lois. Lois is 76 years old and lives in a quiet suburb just outside of Atlanta. Her house has a white porch swing, a bird feeder she keeps full for cardinals, and a kitchen that still smells like cinnamon long after the baking is done. Lois lost her husband Charles 12 years ago. He was the love of her life, a kind, steady man who wrote her a letter every birthday and never once forgot their anniversary. After he passed, she packed up his things neatly into boxes and placed them in the guest room closet. She didn't have the heart to go through them, not right away, and then, not the next year, and then never. Until one morning, she told me, she woke up with this strange, soft thought: it's time. Not out of pressure, not out of guilt, but out of readiness. Still, when she opened that closet, she froze. It wasn't just Charles's things in there, it was decades of birthdays, holidays, vacations, arguments and makeups, laughter and quiet meals. How do you sort through a love like that? How do you know what to keep? That's when I shared with Lois something I've come to believe deeply. Not everything needs to be kept, but everything deserves to be honored. So we created what I call the Gratitude Goodbye. The Gratitude Goodbye is not about throwing things away. It's about closing a chapter with love. It's about saying thank you before saying goodbye. It is gentle, it is sacred, and it is healing. We started with Charles's letters. Every birthday, every anniversary, every little note he tucked into her suitcase before a trip, or into her lunch bag when she worked the early shift. Over 100 letters carefully saved. Lois made a pot of tea, put on their favorite old jazz record, and sat by the window with a soft blanket. She read each letter out loud, one by one. Some made her laugh. Some made her cry. Every single one reminded her of how loved she had been. For each letter she chose to let go of, she said a quiet thank you and placed it in a wooden box that we later burned in a small backyard ceremony. She kept the ones that still lit something in her heart, the ones she knew she might read again on a quiet Sunday. The rest, she let them go with deep gratitude. The Gratitude Goodbye helped her reclaim her home, not by forgetting Charles, but by making space for her own voice again. This ritual isn't only for lost loved ones. It works for all kinds of items with emotional weight: childhood artwork, gifts from a former friend, clothes from a time in life that feels far away now. If it carries memory, it deserves a moment. Here's how it works. You choose the items you're ready to release. You don't rush, you don't judge. You simply hold each item and say thank you. Thank you for the comfort. Thank you for the beauty. Thank you for the laughter, or the lesson, or even the pain that helped you grow. You can write a short note. You can light a candle. You can take a photo if you'd like to preserve the memory without keeping the object. And when you're ready, you release it, not into the trash, but into the next stage of life. Donated, recycled, or given with love. This is about letting go without guilt. It's about replacing shame with reverence, about understanding that objects are not proof of love. They are reminders of it, and you, wise as you are, get to choose which reminders you want to carry forward. Lois told me later, I didn't think I'd ever be able to part with those things, but when I said goodbye with gratitude, it stopped feeling like loss. It felt like peace. If you're holding on to something today, an old box, a pile of cards, a piece of clothing you can't bring yourself to donate, I invite you to try the gratitude goodbye. Give yourself permission to release with love. Because when you bless the past, you don't lose it. You finally free yourself to live fully in the present. Lesson 4. The just-in-case myth. Let's talk about something that lives in nearly every home I've ever walked into. The just-in-case drawer. You know the one. It's filled with random batteries, old keys, expired coupons, extra cords you can't identify, 3 tape measures, and maybe a pair of reading glasses that haven't been strong enough for your eyes since 2006. But here's the thing. Just in case doesn't only live in the drawer. It lives in your linen closet, your garage, your craft room. It lives in every corner where something is sitting quietly unused, waiting for a moment that hasn't come and probably never will. I want to introduce you to Joan. Joan is 70 years old and lives in Wisconsin. She's a retired nurse with a heart the size of a church potluck. Over the years, she collected things not out of greed or carelessness, but out of love, preparation, and responsibility. She had backup supplies for every season, every possible occasion, every what if, an extra set of china, just in case the family came over for a big dinner again. Craft supplies she might use for a grandchild's school project. Clothes from 3 different sizes, because you never know. And enough extra blankets to house a winter shelter. Joan's heart was in the right place, but her home was heavy. Every drawer and shelf was filled, not with joy, not with use, but with fear. The fear that if she let something go, she might need it again and not have it, that she might regret it, that she might be unprepared. So I asked Joan 3 questions. I call it the replacement reality check, and it changed everything. Here they are. First, if I needed this item tomorrow, could I realistically get another one? Second, what would it actually cost me to replace it in today's world? And third, in the last 5 years, how many times have I truly needed this item? Let's take her 12 screwdrivers, for example. Yes, 12. All scattered across different drawers. Joan admitted she hadn't used more than one in recent memory. If she ever needed another, she could buy it for under $5 at the hardware store, or borrow it from her neighbor, or call her son. She kept one. The rest were donated to a local shelter that helped single moms furnish their first apartments. Then we looked at her old party supplies. She had plastic plates, punch bowls, fondue forks, tiki lights, all for parties she hadn't hosted in over a decade. She smiled and said, I guess I thought if I kept it, the life I used to have might come back. And there it was, the real reason behind the clutter. Not preparation, not practicality. Well, longing. Letting go doesn't always mean admitting we don't need something. Sometimes it means admitting that a certain season of life is over, and that can hurt. But holding on to clutter doesn't bring those years back. It only clouds the beauty of the years you still have left. Joan made a new rule for herself. If she hadn't used it in 5 years, and if it cost less than $20 to replace, it had no business taking up space in her home. That rule changed her life. She found empty shelves again, breathing room, clarity. The fear melted away when she realized she wasn't losing security. She was gaining freedom. You don't need to be surrounded by backup plans to feel safe. Sometimes safety comes from trusting yourself, trusting that if a need arises, you will figure it out. You always have. You're resourceful, wise. You've lived through so much. You can let go of that old popcorn machine and still have everything you need. So I ask you gently, what item in your home are you keeping just in case? And what would happen if you let it go? Would your life fall apart? Or would you finally feel a little bit lighter? Do a small test. Choose one just-in-case item. Answer the 3 questions. And if you find that it's not truly serving your life anymore, let it go. Release it to someone who needs it right now, instead of holding it for a someday that may never come. You don't need to keep carrying the weight of maybe. What you need is space to breathe. Lesson 5. You are not your stuff. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret is 82 years old and lives in a modest home outside of Denver. She's a widow, a mother of 4, and a retired piano teacher who still keeps fresh flowers on her windowsill and wears perfume every morning just for herself. But when I first met Margaret, she was stuck, not physically. Emotionally, her bedroom closet was so full she could barely open the door without things falling out. Coats, dresses from the 1980s, purses she hadn't carried in years, and shoes she could no longer wear. The floor was lined with old photo albums, a box of scarves from her sister, and sweaters that once belonged to her late husband, Paul. She said to me, "Every item in there has a story. How do I know what to let go of and what still matters?" I told her something I believe with all my heart. You are not your stuff. Your love for Paul doesn't live in those sweaters. It lives in your memories, in the way you still hum the song he wrote for you, in the way your eyes light up when you talk about your honeymoon. His spirit is not in a closet. It's in you. Margaret sat with that for a long time. She ran her hand across one of Paul's old cardigans, smiled and said, "Then I think I can let this go." And she did, gently, carefully, with love. She kept 2 of his favorite sweaters, the ones that still made her feel close to him on cold nights. She donated the rest to a local men's shelter, knowing someone else could be wrapped in warmth and dignity. That was just the beginning. Next, she looked at her clothing. Her closet was filled with things that no longer fit her body or her life. Long, formal skirts from decades ago. Heels she hadn't worn since her youngest daughter's wedding. Blouses she'd bought on clearance but never really liked. She created what she called her comfort and confidence section. She kept the clothes that made her feel good now. Soft fabrics, kind colors, easy fits. She said, "At this age, I don't need a closet full of maybes. I need pieces that say, this is me now and I'm enough." What a beautiful truth. You are not obligated to keep items that no longer serve your life just because they once did. You are allowed to evolve, to soften, to simplify, and yes, to release. Margaret told me something I'll never forget. She said, "I always thought I was keeping things to preserve the past, but I realized I was actually keeping myself stuck there." After clearing out her closet, she started sleeping better. She smiled more. She began taking watercolor classes at the senior center and even booked a weekend trip with her daughter to Santa Fe. A trip she'd put off for years because there was just too much at home to deal with. Let me tell you something. In case no one else has said it lately, you are not the protector of everything that's ever happened. You are the author of what comes next. You do not have to keep that dress just because it fits you in 1985. You do not have to hold on to your adult children's artwork if they don't even remember making it. You do not need to keep your mother's crystal if it's been hidden in a cabinet for 30 years. You are allowed to say, "This was important, and now it's complete." You are allowed to choose peace over pressure, lightness over guilt, space over sentiment. Letting go doesn't mean you're losing what matters. It means you're making space for what still can. So ask yourself gently, what part of your home feels heavy? And what would it look like if that space became a place of calm again? You've carried so much for so long. You deserve to walk lighter now, not because you're erasing the past, but because you're finally honoring the life that's still unfolding. Your next chapter begins now. Take a breath with me. Right now, somewhere in your home there is a drawer or a box or a shelf, waiting, not for judgment, not for guilt, but for kindness, for attention, for release. Decluttering isn't really about getting rid of things, it's about reclaiming space. Physical space, yes, but also emotional space, mental space, even spiritual space. Because here's the truth, my dear friend. You are not your possessions. You are not your storage room. You are not the clothes that no longer fit, or the keepsakes gathering dust. You are a living, breathing, evolving woman with more wisdom than any box could hold, and the life ahead of you. It deserves to be lived in a space that feels light, clear, and true to who you are now. What if today, instead of thinking about everything that needs to be done, you simply chose one small place to begin? A sock drawer, a teacup cabinet, a memory box you've been afraid to open. And what if you treated each item not as clutter, but as a story? A chapter you're deciding how to close, with love, with grace, and maybe even with a smile. There is no rush. There is no right way. There is only your way. And whatever that looks like, it is enough. You've already done the hardest part. You showed up. You opened your heart to a different way of seeing, and you allowed yourself to imagine what life could feel like, with just a little less weight on your shoulders. So let me ask you something important before we go. Who is the woman you are still becoming? Is she lighter, freer, more joyful? Is she finally living for herself without apology? Because she's already inside you. And every drawer you open, every item you bless and release, brings her closer to the surface. You're not letting go to forget the past. You're letting go to honor it and to make space for the next beautiful chapter of your life. I hope you feel proud of that, because I sure am proud of you. If this message touched something in you today, I invite you to share it. Maybe there's a friend, a sister, or a neighbor who needs to hear it too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel so we can walk this journey together, week by week, one gentle step at a time. This isn't about perfection. It's about peace. You've carried so much for so long. Now it's your turn to be carried, by grace, by simplicity, by the freedom that comes when you finally decide. I'm ready. You are. You're ready. And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way.